Hello and welcome. I'm thrilled to have you all here as we dive into a critical topic for anyone involved in driving innovation within the organization: the challenges of gaining executive support for innovation initiatives. As leaders, you're often faced with the daunting task of championing new ideas and ensuring they align with strategic goals while delivering tangible value at the same time. This is normal feat, especially in an era where the pace of change is relentless and the stakes are incredibly high. Today, we'll explore how to secure that crucial executive buy-in, how to streamline the approval process to avoid the so-called red tape, and how to engage employees at all levels to foster a culture of innovation. Our goal, as always, is to provide you with actionable strategies that you can implement in your own organizations to drive success. So please stay tuned and feel free to share your questions and comments with us. Our first key question today is: what strategies can I use to gain executive support for innovation initiatives? So picture this: you are the CEO of your company, or just someone who had a brilliant idea that could drive great value to your organization. But before even thinking about doing anything about it, you will need somebody, let's say your boss or your board, or somebody to give you the green light. JP, how would you approach this?
Yeah, my answer to that one is traction first. Let me
Hmm.
explain a little bit of what I mean. And typically, when you talk about corporate innovation and corporate sponsors are not typically incredibly comfortable in investing in this like new ideas, and they find them a little bit risky. So the way that we do it is try to take as much risk out of it as possible before you even engage with them. A good way of doing it is, for example, starting what we call a waiting list, grabbing your value proposition, taking it to market, and rallying a group of people that say, hey, if you built this, I would like to come. I would like to see what this is about. I'm interested in what you're talking about. I'm interested in the product that you are pitching and your value proposition. But you don't even finish there. You can even go further than that and say, wait, let's build a waiting list of 1,000 people, and let's grab 5 of them and deliver the product using no code or low code, or servicing through email or through WhatsApp or whatever, and start to engage with them and see how they behave to the operating version of your product. It's a non-scalable part, but that's fine. What we see typically happen is the other way around. People go and say, I need to build this product. It's going to cost us X amount of money to build this scalable product when you don't have a client. Now, if you turn it around and you say you build a waiting list, you have 1,000 people on a waiting list, you've run a pilot, you've got 5 people that are super happy with the service that you've been providing, and yeah, now you need to scale. This is a business conversation. And your corporate sponsor is very calm and is very used to having business conversations. What you're saying is, I have 1,000 clients that would like to be serviced through a digital product. I've serviced 5 of them manually and they're happy. I need to invest to unlock this 1,000 customers, which is very different to say, I've got this idea, I need this money to build this digital product, I don't have any clients. So traction first is the answer. Go to the market, find yourself some traction, and bring to your corporate sponsor a business, not an idea.
Yeah, totally. And I think what that speaks to is when people are looking to invest in something, whether they're a business sponsor or they're literally an outside investor, what they're looking for, if I had to translate traction first to another word, it would be momentum, right? So
Exactly.
from their standpoint, what you've spoken about, I think, is how much momentum do we already have? How big is this idea already today? Put it in those words. But the other side of the equation is how big can it be tomorrow? And I think there's another angle here, which is giving people an idea of the vision for what you're building and what are the next steps to get there, because people need to understand the vision, what they're actually buying into and whether it's worth their investment from their point of view. And they also need to understand what to expect at not just this stage of the journey, but at each stage of the journey, so that your and their expectations can be aligned and people can understand whether you're actually on track with the delivery of this thing against those expectations that you set. When because the the journey that you're going on requires you to keep people in, not just get them on board in the beginning, but keep them engaged actually along the journey, right? And to do that, you need to build credibility with the momentum against the plan, right? And that credibility you have is the result of having a reasonable plan with clear milestones where there's evidence of progress that you can demonstrate, right? And with the waiting list, there's clear evidence of progress that you can demonstrate. With the pilot, there's clear evidence of progress you can demonstrate. We go into that in other videos, the kind of KPIs and the story that you can tell with numbers. But from a bigger perspective, the way that we do it, we call it the now, next, and future, what you're laying out there is a strategic roadmap that articulates how you expect this idea that you're starting with today to actually evolve over time so that you realize that vision that you have put out there. And I think a great example is a bank that we work with recently, where in the first instance, the product was just designed to basically attract people's existing savings, right? And there's, so the team can focus on that challenge and what that means. But that doesn't mean that that's the end vision. That's just the first step. That's what's achievable now. The next step, which is something more exciting for the bank, would be to be able to start to nudge people into making investments, right? So you've started to attract savings, you're nudging them into making investments. And then in future, you might also become much better at getting people to save in the first place. And why that all matters is because the vision that you might have sold people, the objective that you sold them that relates to the actual business goals of the bank would be to grow the assets under management, right? And that was the North Star that you're tracking the whole time, but also that was the sort of the thing that you sold them. And the vision of the future is that you're not just attracting people's savings, you're not just nudging them towards investment, but you're actually creating a whole new market of people who can be investing in your products. And that's what you sell to people at the outset. So you get them on board, and then you have these clear milestones. We call it the now, next, future, which helps to demonstrate to people how you're going to manifest this reality over time. And because there are clear expectations and you can demonstrate progress, you build a lot of credibility that way. And in doing that, you can not only get the support in the beginning, but you can maintain it over a long period of time, because these projects aren't just, a 3-month thing, a 6-month thing. They can take years to get to the point where you have serious traction, right, which is contributing in a meaningful way to the revenue of the business. And I think that's critical to keeping, critical sponsorship on board. Go ahead, JP. Yeah.
No, the important point that you make is crucial, right? You talk about a now, next, future roadmap. We're not talking about a product roadmap. We're talking about how the business is going to evolve, right?
Yeah.
It's the strategy roadmap. You're selling them the vision of the future. So don't try to present the features that are coming. That is not consequential to the conversation that you're having with a corporate sponsor.
At that level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Totally agree.
So I love it, because if you think about it, it really sounds like we're building a startup within the organization. Listen to what we just said, right? Traction first, right? Create results. Like don't get approval to build value first to get the approval. Right? We're talking about the vision, the roadmap, the now, next, and future. Was it, Darren? Right?
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
And we're talking about, this is not about the product. This is about the business and the opportunity, which is exactly like building a startup. And this is actually one of the typical mistakes that we see every single day in founders. Right? They're obsessed with features and building the product, while in reality, investors are looking for business opportunities. Right? So treat your innovation initiative as a startup. You are exactly like a founder within the startup, right? What's the difference? That instead of pitching to external investors, you're pitching to internal investors, your boss, the board, whoever is going to give you the approval, but it's exactly the same. So as a founder, what do you need? You need to propose something, show something that makes sense, that is aligned with the goals, and that just makes sense to spend more time and money on to get that initial approval. Once you get that, you build value, right? And you keep going. Because think about it, it's like a startup when it's raising money, right? You don't raise all of the money at once. You break it down into smaller bites, right? And the first one is just, enough to get started. It's kind of like the minimal valuable product. It's the minimal valuable round, right? You raise as much money you need, right, just to get started. And how do you do it? By showing the value, that it's a valuable idea, and to show the roadmap, right? So I like this analogy, right, of treating, again, like in innovative initiatives, like little startups. And I like this idea of looking at the journey of your initiative similarly to the journey of a startup, right? You break it down into milestones, right? And you raise money, you get approval little by little. So this brings me to the next question, right? So we were focused on the first phase, right? We got the first yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we're not over like a startup. We're going to need to raise more money, right? We will need to maintain executive support. And the risk is that we might end up spending too much time on too much effort seeking for support instead of focusing on working on our initiative, right? Or even worse, we got to a point in which we get stopped at some point because somebody at C-level executives, right, they changed their mind or the circumstances change or whatever, right? So even if we got that initial red light, we're not over, right? This is not over. We're not done. We need to keep maintaining that support, right? So how would you guys approach this
Yeah.
once they get started?
Well, the answer to that question is clarity for me. Let me explain what I mean with clarity, and I'll outline it in the way that I've seen it fail. I've seen a lot of corporate innovation that gets funded, and that they go into a process where there is no clarity around what level of proof, what needs to be done for the next round of funding to be unlocked. It's left open. We'll meet again next year and we'll talk about the progress. And that's where the problems begin, because you get into this catch-22 problem where it's not enough, but you don't have enough money to do what is enough, and then you end up in a process where you don't have the funding that you need to get the outcome that they're asking for. So clarity is about having a series of what we call gates, and I call them gates because when you go through a gate, it's not a time it's not a time, but it's a place in a location. So you need to go to a particular gate, right? And we typically use 3 gates, right? The first gate is what we call the idea stage gate. And you've crossed that gate when you have qualitative data that you have a value proposition that people love. You had like 10 conversations that are very structured with 10 customers, and the 10 of them say that they love what you're thinking about, the value proposition that you're pitching them, right? And this is, in the first gate, is where we set up this concept of the proof and the promise. So when we go through the first gate, we say, okay, I've proven that I have a value proposition that seems to be desirable to our customers. My next, like what I promise I'm going to do is that I'm going to build and I'm going to prove that I have traction by building a waiting list, right? That's my promise. And that is the same as your proof at the end of the gate. So in moves the next gate. You've done your first promise. My promise is to build a waiting list. And that's our second stage. Right? Our second stage is about going to market and building a waiting list of eager customers that want your product. So you work on your value proposition, you bring it to market, and you get as many as you can. Typically, if it's a consumer value prop, we'll go on the thousands, right? And then you present again, and you say, I got 1,000 customers. I told you I was going to do 500. I've got 1,000, or I have 10,000. I promise you that. This is my proof. You can audit the 1,000 customers. We need to move on. And that's the next gate that you go in. And that's when you start operating the business. This is when you start using low code or no code to operate a series of those customers. You grab maybe 50 of them and you put them into some kind of very rudimentary product. And that's our third stage. And again, what is your promise when you go into the third stage is that you are going to get strong indication of product market fit. You're going to get strong indications that the rudimentary version of your product is being adopted, that you don't have a leaky bucket where you put a customer on the top and it goes right on the bottom 30 days after that. You put a customer on the top and it stays. And you put another customer on the top and it stays. So marketing is worth something, right? And that's your third stage. And you track product market fit. And when you get to 35 to 40% scoring on product market fit, you go back and you say, I've got this, let's move on. And that's when you start to think about building a scalable business. Not then. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think it's so clear, right? Because you've got a series of gates where it's very clear what proof you need to demonstrate, and people sort of bought into that at the beginning of the process, right?
Exactly.
But those gates and that proof, you can only agree there when you have clarity in the first place about what the process is. And
Exactly.
we're not saying that this is the only process, but it is a universal process. I mean, if you distill the process that virtually every startup or new idea will follow, there is this stage of validating the value proposition. There is a stage of building some initial traction with a waiting list to prove that you've got something. There is a stage of working through a pilot, which is a design process in and of itself. That's, you can see that everywhere in successful journeys that startups are taking. And what we're doing here, we're just distilling this for you so people can have clarity on what is the process that you can follow, which is a proven process to follow.
Clarity is the mother of being able to align your corporate sponsors to understand what to expect and what is positive, right? A value proposition changing on the first stage is not a bad thing. It's something very positive as long as you get the desirability levels that you were hoping to get.
Yeah. And it's also a good discipline for the organization, because obviously you want to be continuing to invest in those ideas that are getting traction, and you want to cut off investment in those ideas that don't get traction, that aren't working, right? And that, despite whatever iteration according to the process, have still not been able to get traction. That's because, otherwise you're going deep down the road with an idea that just is destined to fail, and it's not changing in any way. So the context of thinking about all this is managing risk. As somebody who's sponsoring innovation within the business, what you want to see in the people who are leading those initiatives is how are they managing the risk of failure, and how are they reducing the risk of failure. And the way that you want them thinking about it is to be able to identify what those risks are and to be focused on mitigating those as part of this process moving forward. And that's why there is the value prop validation stage, the waiting list, and the pilot, right? But it does go beyond that, because essentially what you're looking at there is product market fit. But even as you go to the next stages, there are other things that you need to address as well. Maybe there's the risk that this, the segment, the target audience that you're focused on doesn't struggle enough to pay for the solution that you're talking about, at least at the level that you're proposing. Or there's a risk that, with the channel that you're using, it's actually too expensive for your model, right? So the money you're going to bring in is not going to pay for the acquisition of those customers over that channel. Or that, the actual product that you're designing, in the way that it works, it doesn't actually make a big enough difference to the time or the complexity of getting the job done for your customer. So you need those, you've got a set of working hypotheses there as someone who's leading a product, right? And you need to be proving or disproving those along the journey, right? And to be able to have a clear process and framework for doing that is essential for being able to reduce the risk of failure at the end of the day, so that you can maximize the probability of you getting to a point where you have a money printing machine. A business is actually working. You put $1 in and you get more than $1 out, right? That's what all these startups are working towards, getting closer and closer to a viable business. And every step along the way, you're reducing the number of working hypotheses you have that you have not yet proved. Right. So with this approach, this traction first approach, where you have clarity on what the milestones are, and you have agreed about what the proof is that the business is looking for, you can be very clear with people and make sure you set clear expectations about what the proof is that you need to be providing at each stage, so that the sponsorship that you get in the beginning is sponsorship that you can maintain throughout that journey. And I think that's the key there.
Yeah. Love it. Let's switch gears for a sec, because we've been talking about getting the green light from above, how to get started, how to maintain the support. That's great. But what about getting support from the rest of the organization, right? Because innovation is not something that we can achieve in isolation, right? We need the support of the team or the other employees, other departments, other areas, right? So while securing executive support is crucial, it's equally important to foster a culture of innovation across the entire organization, right? So this means rallying employees at all levels to not just support, but actually to participate in your innovation initiatives. So JP, what's the first thing you would do to obtain support across the whole organization?
Yeah. Lorenzo, I'm a hammer, so it's going to sound like I'm always the same answer, right? But the way I see it is that momentum attracts talent. And what I mean is,
that's a good way to put it.
no one wants to be part of a sinking ship, right? It's like, do you want to be there or not? And when it comes to like innovation and building a new business, the ship is not sinking as long as it's moving. It's not sinking as long as it's creating momentum, as long as it's getting new clients in, as long as there is a vibe behind it, right? There's no like, ideas are what they are. They're nothing until they start getting clients involved. So the first thing I would say is start with momentum, right? And to get people rowdy about the project, showcase the momentum that you're getting, and as Darren said before, the vision of the future, where you're going, the thing that you want to build. This is not just, an app. We're building a business here, and we're going to hit the bottom line. And the way we prove that we're going to hit the bottom line is because we already have this momentum, and all these clients want to get involved. So you're not going to build this thing that nobody wants, which is basically the biggest fear when it comes to corporate innovation. Building a thing, spending a lot of money that nobody ever used, right? So start with momentum. And then the second thing that really works well for like our experience is you need to change the game you allocate and find your team for the project. Typically, in any corporate project, the boss will say, oh, JP will be very, very good for this project, and we'll also draft Lorenzo, and I think Darren will do great. Let's talk to them and get them involved. And it is the way that typically the army works and typically everything else works. But given that for this particular project, you're going to need blood, meaning you're going to need people that really want to get the job done, that really want to put like energy and passion into it, you need to do it the other way around. You need to pitch. You need to not headhunt, but draft. You have to do a draft. And there's different parts or cogs of the team, and we'll go into that in a second. But the key thing for me is like showcase your momentum, showcase your vision of the future, and ask people who wants to get involved, and why. And do it the other way around. Pitch your opportunity and see who picks their hands up. That is much better than just, telling people you now have an innovation project that you need to deal with.
Yeah. It's the difference between it being like a chore and like another thing to do, or feeling like something exciting that you want. Like,
it is a privilege, right?
yeah. You feel like the buzz around it and people are talking about it. There's momentum with this thing. There's excitement around it. Probably more exciting than what's going on elsewhere in the business, on a business as usual basis. So, if you're taking this approach, you should, naturally attract the people who are inclined towards this sort of thing, who are willing to go the extra mile to make it work. And those are the people that you want to attract. You want to attract that level of talent from the business.
You might need to draft only 3 or 4 people, but you draft them all, right? You bring them all into the team, and you like, if 50 people come back, it's like, great, we'll find a job for you eventually, right? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Darren.
Well, just to what you're speaking, eventually you will. Even in the pilot, there are a lot of different roles to undertake in order to make that pilot successful. You need people who are working on acquisition, like bringing people into the top of the funnel. You need people who are collecting the feedback, doing the interviews and other data collection, building dashboards that can help to tell a story with numbers to executives. You need people who are actually going to operate this startup at a very concierge or Wizard of Oz level in the beginning, people who are actually working to deliver that product or service experience. And then, obviously you've got your team who is actually doing the product iteration, who are identifying from all this feedback the problems worth solving and devising, what the next iteration of that product looks like, right? So you've got all those roles and you can build them all out. But in the beginning, obviously, as you say, you can work with, if you've got some like high caliber people, you can cover these roles. And especially if you've got the people who are willing to sweat blood to make it work and who are excited and who thrive in that kind of environment, even better. And you can get to the point where you have your first 500, people on the waiting list, or your first 50 real users as a part of a pilot. And then, as you're hitting these gates, as we've talked about throughout the course of this webinar here, then, that momentum, that buzz, that electricity, that excitement starts to draw people in who want to be a part of it. And there's plenty of roles to allocate there in order to continue to build that momentum. So
just to make it very terrestrial, right? We've hit gate 1 with maybe 1 or 2 people in the team. We hit gate 2 with maybe 3, and gate 4 with no more than 4 or 5. Like,
We're still talking about small teams. Yeah, you don't need an organization here. Agree, totally.
That's a good point, because I always try to keep it very pragmatic, and this is exactly a piece of advice that we're looking for, right? So okay, like it's literally about finding one or two key people that can support you, if true, maybe not even that at the very beginning, and keep it nimble, keep it agile, even if for whatever reason you do have access to more resources, ask yourself, do I really need so many people? Do I really need to spend so much money, right? So uh, because in some cases, right, the kind of like the idea of having limited resources will force you to think, right, to use your head, to use your
True.
brain,
Yeah.
right, rather than just to go out and just, because that's actually one of the typical problems of corporations, right, that you're so big, they're just used to, let me say, buy solutions, right? But in
Yeah.
innovation, there's nothing you can buy.
Yeah. And Lorenzo, consider this. In this process, in these 3 gates, you're going to go through considerable change. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
There is no escaping the fact that the value proposition is going to change, the product is going to change, the proposition is going to, absolutely, practically everything from the original idea is going to change. The smaller the boat, the easier it is to make sure that everybody is looking at the right thing that we're building right now. If you make a boat and there's 50 people in it, there's going to be a hell of briefing going around to do one line of change in your landing page.
Yeah.
That's a great point, guys. And again, like I think that when you talk about startups, everybody understands that change is part of the daily life of an entrepreneur. But when you're
Inevitable.
talking,
Yeah.
right, but from the corporate perspective, right, change is somehow perceived as negative, right, as bad. Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, a corporation is built the way it's built precisely to avoid change, right? Because they were able to
Yeah.
build something so valuable that they don't want
That works.
anything
Yeah.
or anybody
Yeah.
to be able to change that, right? But in the
It
case
also
of
comes from that like product first approach.
yeah,
When you put the product first, when somebody says change, you immediately think expensive, right? Because you need to reline code, right?
Yeah.
But if
True.
I've just laid a couple of lines and I say change, it takes 5 seconds for me to change those lines of text in the landing page.
yeah.
So it's not a problem. It is a problem when you start laying code. And in
Yeah.
corporate, you lay code very early. You're too early to code. And the word change means expensive. And it doesn't need to be that way.
Look,
Totally agree. It's a good
I
point.
love where this conversation is going, because we're here to show uh, practical tips if you want, but at some point it also gets a matter of changing the mindset. Like we can
Yeah.
give you the template, and it's going to work out to a certain point. If you don't change the way you face some challenges, or your mindset, right, it's not going to work. And so I'm happy that we're able to kind of like cover both of these aspects of corporate innovation. So because the reality is, innovation is hard at any level, and when you're part of a big corporation, it might get overwhelming. You might get lost in the process, and this is actually one of the reasons why we're here hosting these sessions. We've worked with hundreds of CIOs and innovators across the US, Europe, and Latam, and we've come to the conclusion that, one, we understand you, right? We feel the pain. You're not crazy. It's okay. And do we want to do something to help you, right? So if you feel this was useful content, please let us know, and stay tuned for more to come. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, JP Hammer. Thank you, Darren. And see you soon.
See you.